Well, welcome to another Dawn of the Data Age lecture. This is on data mapping customer touchpoints. This seemed to be a hot topic. We had quite a bit of registration, quite a bit of attendance. In fact, the technical issue this morning was I was sitting in a different Zoom meeting and it was empty, and I thought, oh, this doesn't make sense with all the data we've collected so far. But this is a topic that is going to, by the end of today, get you in motion, starting to actually do this. Identify touchpoints, identify the data for them, and start to map it in a customer journey framework. As usual, if you have questions as we go, I'd rather answer them in real time than wait till the end. But throw them up in the chat, unmute yourself, you have that ability, ask the question. I will pause and answer it, and hopefully we'll get this done in an hour. I think this is a little bit heavier than some of the past lectures. And one of the things that we added is that there is a recommended reading at the end of this that we'll cover as well. For those who are joining for the first time, I'm Luciano, I'm the founder and CEO of Emperitas. I'm also the founder and director of the Utah Community Research Group at the University of Utah, where I teach econ and data science and research-focused classes. Today's lecture is going to have three parts as usual. The first, we'll talk about the benefits of mapping the customer journey touchpoints. The second is that we will show touchpoint maps. I'll actually show three examples, not just one, using the customer journey as a framework. And then the third part is I will explain how you can start mapping. This is a process I think most businesses are interested in doing. So where would you begin? What are the first steps to get going? As far as the main benefits of touchpoint mapping, I think Amazon Dash is the ultimate example of this. So maybe some of you have a Dash button in your home. This is a single touch purchase that took Amazon almost 20 years to pull off. So they filed the original patent in 1999 for one-click purchase. They were only a 5-year-old company at that point. And now today there are hundreds of these Dash buttons. You need more Tide, you press the button, it's on its way. And now Amazon will deliver it to the trunk of your car or into your home if you give them permission. They have grown to be one of the most massive new companies in the world. And a big part of it is because they paid attention to their touch points, because they were also paying attention to their data. But they got the purchase component of touchpoints down to a single touch. This is sort of the ideal, the utopia. There's other touchpoints. You get invoiced, you get emailed, you have to renew your Prime. Prime goes up in cost. Those are all different touchpoints. You're being marketed to, you're being remarketed to. But the purchase component of that journey, a single button touch. And you can go read about the history of Amazon there at that link before. But I want to set this as the model that I think everyone should strive towards, because what it exemplifies is the use of data in eliminating unnecessary touch points. I also want to give you a little bit of a fluidity warning on terminology. I've tried to be very precise in these lectures with the language that we use, the definitions that we use. I'm not perfect either, so sometimes I get it wrong, but this is a field where, in particular, there are huge differences in the way terms are used. For example, sometimes touch points and journeys are used interchangeably. They're technically not the same thing. I'll make that case in a moment. Sometimes the journey is called a life cycle instead of the journey. Sometimes touch points are called channels. Sometimes personas are called profiles. And this is in part because the terms grew up in three different departments within the organization. The first was marketing. The second was product UX specifically, so the people who were doing the user design. And this is a lot of SaaS companies, apps, platforms, where they have just really fast, real-time feedback about what is or is not working when it comes to interacting directly with the customer. And then customer experience. So you have to be warned that if you read some of the sources, you follow the links that I'm going to provide in the lecture today, some of what will happen is you'll see different terms that mean the same thing. It can get confusing, so just be warned. All right, what is a touch point then? If it differs from a journey, what is a touch point? The most common definition that I have found is this. It is anything that happens between you, the brand, and the customer before, during, and after a purchase. That's it, the whole relationship, every single time you are interacting. It can be physical, it can be in a retail store, it could be a physical visit, It could be a sales drop-in. It could be digital stuff. It could be advertisement. It could be Facebook ads. It could be retargeting. It could be email. It could be an invoice. It could be them calling in for technical service. It could also be a conversation with one of their friends about you. It's every single one of these touch points, and a pattern of this right now is that touch points are going up. They're not getting fewer in number. Amazon has been deliberate in trying to reduce the number of touch points they have. For everybody else, and even for them, the total number is going up. Now, you should discover these touch points at the same time you're mapping the journey. I think one of the failures in most CX advice about this is that you do some sort of inventory of touch points before and then you build the map. You should be doing both at the same time. You can't figure out where stuff fits in if you're not starting to put it in place. And so the customer journey map examples that I'll give you today start with the most simplistic, something you could do on a whiteboard this afternoon, and end with something that would require you to have a data scientist on staff. That's the range over which you can decide to map these touch points. But it's an iterative process. You do it at the same time, back and forth, back and forth. Update the journey, update the touch points. Update the journey, update the touch points. And most of these, by the way, are micro interactions. These are not large things. It's an email, it's an invoice, it's a renewal. Most of these can be considered micro interactions. However, the ones that usually really matter to avoid a bad experience are the big singular ones. And data helps you figure that out. So what about useful touch points? This is an article written by a design engineer who's worked in this industry for 15 years and who says that basically the issue is that you have clogs, you have blockage for the free flow of information about touch points that are, and he defines these 4 things: appropriate, relevant, meaningful, and endearing. Appropriate means that it is in their context, it fits the culture of whatever market you are serving. Relevant means it fits their needs. You understand their needs. You're going to see that come up over and over and over again. If you want to get good at customer experience, start to understand the preferences of your customers, not their demographics, not their psychographics. Start to understand their actual deep human preferences, and you will be able to personalize on a level that makes real connection. And that gets to the third part, meaningful. These interactions should be minimized to what is necessary, and even in that process, because they're important, they should still be endearing. You can make it a positive experience to receive an invoice. You can make it a positive experience to have a renewal notice. You can also not saturate them with 27 different Net Promoter Score surveys throughout the year because of tech support calls and because of marketing and because of IT. You have to get down to what matters so that there is a free flow, no clogs is the point of this, free flow of this data. Someone posted in my work, blocks Google Drive. Can you email the PDF so I can visit the links? I would be happy to. So send me an email at luciano@emperitas.com and I will happily send you back the PDF. All right, what about the customer journey framework? How do these touch points then that are relevant and meaningful, that have been clearly identified, how do you then organize them? The customer journey framework is by far the best method for this. I've talked at length in many of these lectures about this framework. It is the process from everything before they even know who you are, all the way up until they are your customer, through their repeated purchases until they die or decide not to engage in business with you anymore, which is typically called churn. You actually don't have to stop following customers after churn. It is quite possible to continue to build profiles on them. If you go to the link here in the bottom left, this is the 2 lectures ago, I think, in the series, creating data-driven customer profiles, the most complete data picture you can create for a customer. Just because they have left you does not mean there isn't continued data you can collect on them. They will continue to be on social media. If they've already integrated with you, you get some of that data. Continue to understand what happens post their churn. And we're going to talk a lot about churn because there is a huge impact on profitability by reducing churn. Touchpoint mapping is also very important because if you look at what the impact of a single bad experience can do, it's pretty shocking. And customers have more of these touch points, as I said, than they've ever had before, so the chances of one of them going wrong, and it only takes one, is very high. Now, why is this situation happening now? Why didn't it happen before? And I think the answer is it was happening before. If you talk to anybody who ran large call centers for companies who were doing customer service and who were looked at as a cost center rather than a profit center, they'll tell you horror stories. In fact, one of my early jobs was in one of these call centers. They were a very specific environment. And there were people there who were trying to understand how to solve problems effectively, how to make sure that a customer didn't have a bad experience. It's almost all by phone. It was before the days of SMS or online chat or email. That was how you mostly interacted with any sort of these complaints. Well, now they can tweet at you, now they can Facebook message you, now they can email you, now they can Slack you. There is an increasing number of these channels by which that they can have touch points with you. And these are channels. There are social channels and email channels and online channels. And this is in part because the economy is growing, the volume of business is going up, but also in response to that, the organization is specializing, so now there's more people on the business side to have a touch point with a customer. Now look at this impact of a single bad experience. 9 out of 10 customers, B2C, so this is just the consumer market. If you're a B2C company, you're servicing directly to end consumers, you're not going to another business. 9 out of 10, if they have a bad experience, are going to churn. And on the next slide, I'll make the case that you're only going to learn about 1 in about 25 of those cases. Oh, we got a question here in the room. Yeah, go ahead.
So, one bad experience, I'm just kind of curious if it's that the ones who churned, 9 out of 10 said they had a bad experience. And it's sort of like, well, what level of a bad experience pushes somebody to churn?
So,
like I'm just sort of questioning the data.
So the data comes from this link, and it is a company who does customer experience management software. So they actually have the data to see, and I believe this is based on their data, but I'm going to show you an example in a few slides here of a source that turned out to probably not be true. Nobody can tell if it's true or not. But a lot of very high-level organizations cited this source. I cited this source based on their citation of the source. Turns out there's no original citation of the source that anyone can actually find. Okay, so you have to take this with a grain of salt, but I do believe that they have, as the type of software solution they are, the data to tell you effectively if this happens. So if you have anywhere in this customer journey, at any touch point, a customer has a very poor experience. And you're going to find in a moment that they define that on their own expectations. It's not even on what you think should go into a good experience. It's going to be whatever they think should go into a good experience. And if that outcome doesn't match their expectations, to them that is defined as a bad experience. 9 out of 10 of those customers will churn quickly. I don't know what the time frame is. I'm going to guess it's probably less than 30 days or 60 days. It's going to probably differ with the businesses because usually you have longer contracts. A customer can often opt out every month now. But they have the data to look at, oh, we had a call, there was a negative. They can do sentiment analysis. Oh, they were dropping expletives on the phone call. They're doing all that. The good companies are doing real-time text-to-speech translation of those calls. And it's going right into a CRM. And that CRM has that data in every interaction with you. And if you're using that data, you can quickly figure out if this is a one-time episodic real meltdown or if this is like a pattern about you as a customer. And they can change in real time how they respond to you based on that. Now, if you have that power, you can mitigate some of these numbers, but the data that's in these systems seems to show that any bad experience at any touch point, anywhere in the journey, 9 out of 10 customers will churn, 7 out of 10 businesses. So if you're a B2B and your customers are other businesses, 7 out of 10 will churn. And I think that's just a direct reflection of what economists call substitutes in the market. As a consumer, as an end consumer, you have far more options, substitutes. for any one product. Just go look in the soda aisle.
Right.
What 150 different. You can go online and get all kinds of exotic sodas that you can't even get in the store. There's probably thousands of ways to carbonate and sweeten water. Okay? That's the consumer market. Now, there's less companies that do good CRMs. There's fewer companies that have the kind of mass media reach of Facebook or Google. And so I think what you're just seeing in those numbers is businesses have fewer substitutes. They will still, look, 7 out of 10 are still going to move away after one bad experience. It might take 2 years, but they'll do it.
Okay.
Right? So, and we're going to talk about product life cycle. With business-to-business markets, the product life cycles are often very longer than within a consumer market, where you can have instantaneous. You know, the rise of fidget spinners, where are they today? They were everywhere a year ago. And they came out of nowhere. They had a really short product life cycle. Coca-Cola is celebrating its 130-something year this year. Its product life cycle has been huge. Those are still both B2C products. And we're going to talk about why you need to understand what's going on in your product market and then also within the consumer market, which is the customer journey.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Here's the number I said I would cite. 1 in 26. There's only 1 in 26 of those who have a bad experience who voice it to you. The other 25 value their time more than they do the feedback to you. And I would say that disproportionately, the 1 in 26 are probably more extreme opinions. They have to have, if they're really unhappy with you and they want to move on with their life, they don't care about giving you feedback. If they want to give you feedback, it's because they need to. And I think that's being motivated by usually hyper bad or hyper good experiences where they do this. The point being, you have a small sample from which to look at. Unfortunately, most of these problems, when you dig through the data, are solvable. They're not impossible situations. So something just went wrong. It's like driving. It's like why AI is doing so much better than humans when it comes to driving. It's just human error. Someone didn't know about a policy, or someone didn't know about an option that was available. Someone was having a bad day and picked up the phone and took it out on a customer. You're only learning about a fraction of those to begin with, which means that you have to really, really trust the information that you get. Now, customer satisfaction is still the main driver, even though people are obsessed with NPS, word of mouth recommendation, and now are getting equally obsessed with reducing churn, for good reason with the churn, by the way. Customer satisfaction is still a key driver of both of these things. And so as long as you know that you're making the customer happy, you should be able to assume confidently, you should still track, but you could assume confidently, that you're getting word of mouth recommendations and you can measure how much it's reducing churn. And this is the metric I said I'd come back to, a 5% increase in retention. So if you stop 5%, first off, let's back up. 50% of churn is unavoidable. That seems to be across all markets, across all verticals. People have studied this. How much of a customer stopping their purchase with a brand is the result of things that could have been controlled for? It's only about half. The other half seems to be random chance. They die, they get divorced. Their market collapses if you're B2B. You can't control all of it to begin with, so you have to focus on the part you can control. And if you can just move that by 5%, you can just improve the churn of customers by 5%. That leads to a 75% increase in profitability. This is a study done by Bain, cited in this article. That's because it's really expensive to get a customer. It's really cheap to make sure that you keep them. And if you keep them over their lifetime, the value to you is huge. So a small reduction in churn, meaning an increase in retention, can lead to huge profit, not revenue, but profit for your company, even given the small sample you're going to get. So here are the main benefits of knowing your touch points that we've covered. It is what innovative companies are doing to beat their competitors. Customer experience. Amazon did not just kill brick and mortar stores because it was online and it saved you going to the store. People liked going to the store. A lot of people like just walking around somewhere like Barnes and Noble's. What Amazon figured out was how to make the process so much easier to do online that it started to be a burden to go to the stores. One-click buying versus getting in your car, driving to the store, looking around, finding it, walking to the register, paying, going through the debit card. Is it a chip or is it a swipe? One touch. That's why they killed them. It also reduces churn. People keep using Amazon over and over, so much so that another part of their value add was creating recommender engines to show you products you didn't know about that you probably would like, which was all being driven by a focus on increasing lifetime value. E-commerce companies have pioneered lifetime value metrics. They've had some of the earliest solutions. They don't have a complete picture of lifetime value. They're basically just looking at their online purchase behavior, which is a big part, but it doesn't capture into the non-monetary stuff or the things that are happening. It often doesn't include any costs, like all the cost of acquisition for the marketing. But e-commerce focused on increasing lifetime value. And then it provides actionable insights to everyone in the company. Every department, it does not matter what team they're on, it doesn't matter where they are in the organization. The insights that you will get from mapping the touch points across the customer journey, specifically around value, will help every single person become a customer-focused employee who's also focused on the value that you capture as a business for providing something of value to a customer. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but there is a whole LinkedIn article that outlines this. The bar is now being set in customer experience beyond any one industry. So if you think that all you have to do is understand your competitors' customer experience, you are incorrect. Because your customer also participates in dozens of other verticals that you don't have any stake in. And they are looking at the experience that they receive in all of those and assessing you by that, not by what's within your vertical. And you can go to this link and read that article. So I said I'd provide some journey map examples. Before I do that, one of the things that you should understand is that universally, this is probably one of the most consistently supported components of any CX advice you're going to find if you go actually dig through all the sources yourself, is that we got a mic open. There we go. So this is one of the most important repeated things that shows up in all advice. You've got to get into the customer's perspective. Get into their shoes. If all you do is conduct an internal audit, you go, which you need to do, by the way, that's part of the inventory. You have to go department by department with an org chart to figure out who's got what touch points and what data is there, but you cannot stop from the internal perspective. You have to then go to the external perspective, which is the customer. And in fact, that one is far more important. And the things you should be learning are, what are their goals? Why are they buying? This gets back to value. What do they buy you for? What needs do they have that you're fulfilling or not fulfilling? What are some of the barriers that they experience for attaining those goals and fulfilling their needs? And ultimately, what is their expectation? Because again, even if you hit goals, fulfill needs, break down barriers, but you still don't live up to the expectation that they had, they're going to be disappointed. And one of the reasons about focusing on customer lifetime value is you learn to ignore the people who you can never make happy. There's a group you can make very happy. Focus on them. Everybody else, if they want to come along for the ride, that's great. But you need to focus on people who are deriving real value from you. That's where the goals and needs and barriers will become immediately obvious to you. Now, some of this data that you would want to collect about the customer journey is going to be outside of your control. You do not have the ability to listen to every word-of-mouth conversation unless you have one of the hundreds of gaming apps that we're listening to people. It's pretty obvious, by the way, that Google and Facebook are doing this too, and I think they're doing sort of a legal play right now where they say, we're not listening to you. That's probably true. Nobody's probably playing back a recording of your speech. What they are probably doing is taking your text, your spoken text, and converting it to digital text. And then they're data mining that, so that if you say the word Disneyland or you say the word purple, those are people who spend a lot of money on social media. Just try it. Just go talk to people with your phone right out by you. And you will then get retargeted based on the keywords you're saying. It is obvious to me that that is happening. And there are hundreds of examples of companies who were openly doing this. The big tech companies have continued to deny that they're actually doing this, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to get access to all that data. So what do? If you can't get the whole picture, again, you only had 1 in 26 complaining, and now there's things outside of your control. What's the purpose of journey mapping? Well, the parts that you can control, you should understand to their fullest. To do that effectively, you need visuals. There are a huge number of touch points in any journey. There is a huge number of different journeys. This creates mathematically lots of permutations, meaning lots of possible combinations of different touch points and different journeys. The only way you can effectively deal with this right now, computationally and conceptually, is to use personas. Reduce them down into 5 common types of customers. That's still more effective than not understanding them at all. And if you can make order out of this chaos through visuals, you'll have a very effective understanding that will continue to evolve and become more precise about who they are down to the individual level. Okay. Another reason that you want to do this visually is that most people are visual learners. And this, I said I'd come back to this. If you go to that link in the bottom left, it's called the 60,000 fallacy. So this individual and another individual have both tried to trace the origin of this statement that people learned 60,000 times faster visually than they do through written text. So I was exposed to this statistic through HubSpot, which they mention in that link. And I thought, HubSpot's a really credible group. I trust HubSpot. Looks like HubSpot hadn't understood where this data came from themselves. There doesn't seem to be any sort of hard study that implies that this is true. But if you step back and say, well, let's maybe not fight over 60,000 as a number. Is it faster? Do people learn visually more? The answer is yes. It is well established that 60 to 75% of people are visual learners, meaning they will learn best by seeing. And do people learn visually faster? The answer is also clearly yes from other research. So who cares if it's 60,000? It's faster. Use visuals. It expresses information in deeper ways more concisely. And you will have to do this. So here's a couple examples. Let's start with a simple one. This is called the Touchpoint Matrix. And I think this is one of my favorites because this is the one you could go do today. You could go home. Well, I guess you wouldn't want to go home. You could go to your conference room and you could do this. Maybe you want to do it on your own at home. And you can outline in 4 quadrants what are the personal and mass market touch points, what are the campaigns that are driving them, and what are the platforms where this is being serviced. And then all the things you do can be put on this space as a first start. And I think this is really important because if you just start to sit down and go sequentially, I think you will miss some of the big patterns. Because the other part about this, if you go to the source and look at this visual, is that the size of some of these things are represented by, you can do it by the revenue spent or the cost of acquisition. You can do it by the number of employees. You can start to figure out where not just touch points are happening, but the volume of work it requires on your side to service that touch point. And the link is in the bottom left to go get this template and walk through their exercise. I'd say the more common approach is something like this. You do think about it sequentially. You do look at it steps by steps. That second line is steps, and those steps are grouped into stages. And it is a sequential process, so it's good to look at it this way too. I think where a lot of these plots add value is if you look at the bottom part of this chart, and a higher res version is available at that link. But if you look at the customer journey touch points, you can start to identify which departments have those touch points. You need to go one step further. Okay, well, within the department, who's the directly responsible individual over that touch point? But even knowing that there is a touch point with marketing for ads at the awareness stage, but there's also a touch point with marketing for ads possibly in the retention phase. You can plot a lot of this stuff visually. And I think this is the type of visual that makes most sense to most people. But my particular favorite, and one that I said would require a data scientist, this is done in R. You can go to that link and you can get the actual code to reproduce this yourself if you like. Do all the analysis that's presented in this example. They divided the journey into 4 stages. Those are the colors. They then talk about all the things within those journeys, and then they looked at the proportion of customers who are experiencing those things. So which ones saw the posters? Which ones did the checklist? Which ones had the POS promotion? You can start to get this high-level visual. This is one of many, many beautiful visualizations of this process that are highly complex in their data structure. That's great for some people on the team, but maybe this one before that I said was based on stages and steps and departments and responsibilities is going to be the more effective. So just because this one looks great and expresses a lot of information, that doesn't mean that it's more actionable than any of the other examples. You should play around with many of these different visualization types for the map of these touch points and figure out which ones work for which groups. I think one of the mistakes that most companies make with a dashboard is assuming that the dashboard that would work for executives would work for maybe the IT team or work for the product team. That's not the case. They're going to be very, very different types of data, very, very different types of KPIs. Well, the way you express them might also change. It doesn't have to always be bar charts, donut charts, histograms. You should be willing to customize that component to the team for the purpose of making the journey understood so people can effectively act on it. And that's why you need to start this mapping if you have not begun. Okay, so what's the first step? I said I would give you a step-by-step layout. Here it is. It's actually a two-step in the first step. You need to do a touchpoint inventory. You need to understand all the touch points and where they are. This is where an internal audit is great to start, and then you need to go talk to customers. You will not identify all of the touch points by just talking to people within your organization. Now, this can start as a list. It needs to include specific key performance indicators you think you're going to get from that touch point, who the directly responsible individual is, and what kind of visuals you think you're going to want for this. And I say think because you're not going to get it right the first time. You should be doing exploratory data analysis at the same time that you're looking through these data sets and identifying these data sets through a data audit. And this will help you figure out what KPIs are even worth tracking. But this is not a step that you can skip. Another part of making this effective is identifying publicly who are the directly responsible individuals for any one touch point, and what is the purpose of that touch point. If there isn't a clear purpose, or you have 3 touch points with the same purpose, could you combine them to one touch point under one directly responsible individual? This is about using information to guide efficiencies in how you are actually behaving as an organization. And this list should be public and visible. It's not good enough to just have a couple managers who see this. Everybody should be able to look up any touch point and a person over it and pass information along to them. I think one of the big failures right now within organizations is that cross-department sharing of information that is pertinent and important. And that's why another component of this is you got to break down the silos. People have been saying this for years. I've been hearing this for 5 years now. Oh, break down the silos, break down the silos. Nobody that I know of has really successfully broken down the silos. It's starting to happen. But you will not be able to paint a clear picture of the entire journey without going from department to department, from silo to silo. So as you're doing that process, you could start to get that information and put it into a more central location where there's clear data governance and user management access. And this can start with some broad rules, but it has to get better every day. And it won't work unless every stakeholder who needs to get information out of the system can do it effectively, which comes back to customizing visuals by department, those things. And that can often be true about the silos, because the kind of information that any one silo is going to want to look at primarily is going to come from their own domain, from their own department. There's metrics from other things. They like to know NPS. They'd like to know if a marketing lead ultimately converted and turned into a super high value customer. They would like to know that. But most of what they still have to look at to guide their day-to-day job is going to be impressions and clicks and views and campaign A/B test outcomes. But a central environment allows you to break silos and then provide directly what each department might need. Another part of the advice that it just shows up in all of the CX literature is the relationship status. This comes to the customer journey matters. If they're in the awareness stage of the journey, you need to be treating them very differently than if you're trying to retain them and grow them. That requires different strategy, which requires different data, which requires different dashboard visualizations. You can't treat this as one type of customer across the whole journey. And I would encourage you to even move further. You're looking at the consumer market in that sense. You should go further and look at your product lifecycle. All the J-curve growth that companies like to point out happens at a very specific stage in their lifecycle. No one continues that J-curve growth forever. At some point, they'll hit market maturity, they'll peak, they'll die. Could take 140 years like Coke. Could take a year like a fidget spinner. You should understand where you're at in that product life cycle because that will determine how you interact with customers wherever they are in their journey. Most customer experience or customer success teams that we talk to are very focused on NPS and then to a lesser degree to customer satisfaction. And to the point that you will have in any one year, potentially as a customer, 4 to 5 on average times where you were asked to provide a Net Promoter Score. So let me give you an example. Maybe you are a customer of a B2B software company. And so that company sends you every 6 months a 3-question just quick survey. Hey, just answer these 3 questions really quickly for us. One might be customer sat, one might be Net Promoter Score through a willingness to recommend 0 to 10, and then the other might be an open-ended, unstructured, will tell us why you feel that way. So twice a year they're asked to do that. And then they come to the company's summit. And then after the summit they're asked in the survey, it's one of many questions, what's your Net Promoter Score? And then they have a problem, so they call into tech support. And after the call, they get a quick 2-question survey, what's your Net Promoter Score? And then marketing wants to know what Net Promoter Score is. So then they email the person and they say, tell us your Net Promoter Score. This person has potentially answered half a dozen times what the Net Promoter Score is. Well, first off, that's not a wise thing to do. But it does provide the opportunity to compare. If there's variation in those values, I think you'll find that there's not a lot of meaningful variation in them. And you shouldn't be collecting it this much. And that's because marketing doesn't know that IT already has Net Promoter Score data. And IT doesn't know that the customer experience team is sending out yearly, biannual surveys. All those departmental divides lead to a lot of overlap that saturates especially customers with survey fatigue related to Net Promoter Score. And it's not even the whole picture. It's a good metric, it's not the best one. Now, if you are collecting unstructured text as part of it, that's great. And you can use sentiment analysis on that unstructured text, and you will get a very high return on investment for that activity. You will learn things about it that you just never would have seen by looking at scaled survey questions. But any one touch point potentially has lots and lots of data, so exploratory data analysis lets you cut through to figure out what are the right KPIs. Customer satisfaction, Net Promoter Score, customer lifetime value, time to resolution. It's going to depend, again, on your product lifecycle, their customer journey, your department. Identify them, and then you can display them, and teams can start to act on them. Now, this is not a bottom-up process. This is not something that's going to happen in some departments and not others. This is a top-down process. It will require leadership to take a leap of faith into this field. Again, this is a new problem for most companies. They don't have CX professionals. They're only starting to pay attention to the customer experience. And so, like anything new, you should ease into it. The brand Touchpoint Matrix, which was the simple map example I showed you with the quadrant, that's a great place to start. Here's the link. Go there. This is something you can do this afternoon. It can't stop there. The end goal has to be having a far more precise level of insight every single day into that customer experience. The internal audit, by the way, to find all the touch points, that is more of a one and done process. The listening to the customer and understanding their perspective is not a one and done process. That is going to happen over and over and over. And as new social media channels, what happens with AR? Who has a customer service, an augmented reality customer service team right now? Where you can step through a mirror and suddenly be at the headquarters getting a resolution. If you haven't been watching some of the videos that are going around on the internet right now, the last couple weeks, about these AR portals, just look up AR portal, go to YouTube, it'll ruin 2 hours of your day. You'll just get sucked into watching these. It's like Monsters, Inc. There's just a door there and it takes you suddenly to Austria. And the second you step through, you're in the Alps and it's snowing. And it looks and feels very real. And if you've not done VR, newer VR, it's very, very immersive. It's amazing how immersive it actually feels. Who's got an AR customer service team? Okay, that's probably a new touch point. That new touch point's going to have new data. What data are you going to collect? Who's the directly responsible individual over it? How are we going to map it? What are its dependencies? And then what are we going to do to visualize it? That's the level of detail you have to do over and over and over to keep these maps up to date. Well, why go through this effort? I talked about the benefits before. It's easy to get lost in trying to realize those benefits, so here's a couple goals for it. There's 3. The first is reduce friction. Think back to that Amazon Dash example. Reduce the total number of touch points. That means you're reducing the amount of data you're collecting. It means you're reducing the chances that something can go wrong at any one stage. It means that you're reducing the staff that it requires to service those customers. Just because specialization has been happening in businesses doesn't mean that it's been happening efficiently. You might have 3 touch points that all have the same purpose. Combine them into one. And Amazon Dash is a good example of another benefit of doing this. Okay? Amazon made almost $18 billion last year on AWS, which is their cloud service. They did not set out in 1999 when they were patenting one-touch clicks to become a web server services company. But what happened is they were so data obsessed that they were having to buy so much volume in server space that they hit this tipping point where they could actually buy even more at a marginally low cost and then resell it at a higher profit. So they started doing that. And that's turned into an $18 billion channel of revenue for them by selling their marginal space. So here's another benefit of the touchpoint mapping. You might discover some other opportunities that you're not currently exploiting. And those opportunities might generate huge amounts of revenue at high levels of profit. And as long as you're focused on customer lifetime value, you will see that. All right, goal number 2 for all this data and all this mapping. The first step should be you getting an understanding of what's going on. Because right now, if most of you honestly answer yourself, do you understand this entire process, what it's like to be in a customer's perspective? I think the answer will be no. You can post in a comment and tell me you're wrong. Tell me your experience. Tell me how much you know about them. And here's what my response would be. Okay, in 30 seconds, describe them. Describe them to me in full detail. And if you can do it, that's great. What about everybody on your team? And what about the other teams in your organization? Because you could be one savant inside your organization who just goes unnoticed and unappreciated at the water cooler. It makes no impact on the organization. The whole organization has to be focused around understanding who the customer is. This allows you to personalize. And this is one of the most commonly repeated components of a good customer experience as defined by the customers themselves. Doesn't matter the vertical, doesn't matter B2B, B2C, doesn't matter age groups, demographics. They want it to be more customized to them. They're tired of being sold the average product, the one size fits all. And another benefit of the technology right now is it's becoming more possible to provide this kind of personal experience. And so people are, again, comparing your experience to the experience they get from Xbox Live or the experience they're getting from the AR customer support that they got from Twitter. And now suddenly you have to live up to that expectation. Well, you'll be able to see those preferences changing over time. You'll be able to respond as an organization if you are tracking those touch points, if you have that data, if there are clear KPIs. Because you will be able to move into a different realm with data science, prediction. Not just what has been happening, but now what is going to happen. And any predictive model you build, here's my advice. My general data science advice for you if you're not a technical person, but you might oversee or touch data science teams. My general advice is test and validate in small batch before anything is pushed out into the wild full release. This is usually done through A/B testing with a sample. Understand who your sample is. There's other Dawn of the Data Age lecture series that we have talked about sampling at length. Random, non-random, snowball versus stratified versus clustered. You have to know that stuff because, again, you're only going to get a small group. And then from that, you got to figure out how to predict a personal experience that you can provide to each of these individual customers. And if you do that, you're going to dominate your competitors. And the third, the advice of the featured reading that I'm about to cover in a moment here, and the one that Amazon obsessed over for a long time was total lifetime value. It is not about a one-time purchase. It is not about a purchase in a one-year window. You will be chasing bottom of the barrel business if that's your model. You have to be looking at the fact that predictably, 1 in 5 of your customers will be generating 80% of the revenue you receive. So how do you customize their experience? How do you get them to recommend? How do you make sure that no matter what kind of customer experience they have, it ends positively? Because the loss of them to you, revenue-wise, is far higher than any other average customer. And they're in there. It's called the Pareto principle. In marketing, it's known as the 80-20 rule. It is predictably there. You have to deal with that. Customer lifetime value lets you. All right, so what have we covered before we go into the reading and questions? We talked about the benefits of mapping touch points. Innovative companies are doing this. It gives you insight into value. It lets you reduce churn. It increases retention. It increases willingness to recommend. It increases customer satisfaction. Because you can see the process and you can start to improve it. You can start to personalize it. You can start to understand it. This needs to be done through a visual, a map. That map has to be based on the actual touch points, which require an inventory. That inventory should list KPIs tied to that data set that's tied to that touch point, who the directly responsible individuals are over, what the business purpose of that touch point is, what the goals of that touch point are. This is where the SMART goals system comes in very helpful. We've talked about that in many of the past lectures, and there is a lecture on our YouTube page that you can find about SMART goals. It contains SMART goals. And then how to start mapping that two-step inventory, the internal audit versus getting in the customer's shoes, the continual process, expanding, understanding the new channels that are going to be used, the new touch points that will be created, minimizing those touch points once you've got them mapped so that you can provide the personalized, perfect customer experience that keeps a customer retained and increases your profitability, not just your revenue. All right, I said there was a new section, something that I will end on each time. One reading that I think informed a lot of what was presented today, maybe more than any of the others. And that's always outside of Emperitas. It's not me or any of our other content. So this came from Forbes. It was posted 2 days ago. So it really showed up last minute. In fact, someone slacked it to me yesterday after this slide deck was already done. And I was like, oh, this is great. There's so many good metrics that come out of this. The 1 in 26 comes out of this. The Bain citation, the 5% leading to 75% profitability. A lot of that comes from this article. Again, this could be like the 60,000 time faster interpretation. Maybe this is not true. You should weigh it against all other information you know, but here's the summary. The author is the CEO of Customer. They are a customer service team-specific software tool that measures most of the touch points through customer service and helps with a lot of the outreach. The cliff note is that the methods of the service industry, the customer service industry, are outdated, and every industry says that, but they are particularly true. in customer service. The old call center approaches haven't changed in 20 or 30 years. And the market is rapidly changing. And if you're not using data about lifetime value, you're not going to succeed because you'll be partial in everything that you do. You'll see some little sample who have more extreme NPS experiences. And we'll put that in context with the rest of the experience, maybe by looking at the product, by looking at the sales patterns, or by looking at the marketing and the messaging. You won't have that complete picture. And so you will be subject to false interpretation because of your limited scope and view. And if you're not using deep analytics to offset this and robust methods, then you won't actually realize that success of moving forward technologically as a customer service team.
What's NLP?
NLP is natural language processing, sentiment analysis. So I mentioned that before. He makes the case. I do want to say this is a good point to bring this up because I love sentiment analysis. We've been doing it here for years. It was amazing when it first came out. And there's all kinds of incredible stuff that's resulted from it about you can do reactive survey questions in some of these CX tools based on the sentiment of an open-ended, unstructured data field. That's amazing. Technologically, that's amazing. It's not always correct. It doesn't get the subtleties of human language quite yet. That's improving rapidly. If you didn't see Google's AI assistant making a phone call and booking an appointment that was circulating the last 2 days because of their summit, it's amazing. The person on the other end, that technically is the Turing test passed. The person on the other end did not at any point realize that it was talking to a computer. And it sounded very, very natural. That's NLP. So the potential for this is huge. I do think that customer service teams are really excited about this because it's maybe one of the first dips into AI for their field, and they're giving too much credit to what it can do for them currently. They've still got a lot of hard other observational data that can build great predictive models around value for things like how to prioritize service, how to change service around value that don't require unstructured text, which is what NLP is for. Okay. So with that, what's coming up next time? We will be identifying personas with agile research. So this is a research-based, experimental survey design-based, segmentation clustering-based approach to finding personas. And then mapping those personas based on behavioral choice motivations to the other things like demographics or social channels that they're targetable on or messages that resonate with them or price sensitivity. But understanding who they are and how they make choice at a deep human level and using that as the way to segment through clustering methods. That'll be on Thursday, May 24th. You will be able to register at the same domain probably in a day or so. With that, I will turn to questions. You can put them up in the group chat. You can also unmute and ask them yourself. We will have, let's see, looks like we only have a few moments, but I'm happy to stay a little bit later if we have any questions. So the PDF, yeah, that was one of the questions that was up in the email. Yes, please send me an email, luciano@emperitas.com, and tell me that you need the PDF, and I will send you that link. You will also be able to get it off SlideShare. It'll be a lower quality off SlideShare, but we always post the slides from these on SlideShare, and we always post the video on our YouTube page. So if you want to go to our YouTube page, you can subscribe, and then you will also be notified of these lectures, which happen every 2 weeks should you not be able to attend one. It's been great. We're noticing that we're seeing a lot of repeat people, and that's wonderful for the purpose of this lecture series. But if you do miss something, we don't want it to be gone forever. We put both the slides and the video up for you in public domain. Other questions? Last call. All right, well, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see some of you on May 24th for the next one, Identifying Personas with Agile Research. It will be, again, a new entry in the Dawn of the Data Age lecture series. Have a great day.